All right, so let's go ahead and recap some things that you would have taken away from the previous video. So when we have our f of t of the form 10, so something, say it's 10e to the 3t, previously our go-to form of y was going to be a e to the 3t, but what we saw in the previous video is that depending on the roots of that auxiliary equation, we have two other choices in that scenario. Okay, so these are the three options for a scenario like that. Now, I also want to go ahead and make a statement that we did an f of t for sine, right? And we found that the form of y would be a sine of t plus b cosine of t. But just to go ahead and spirit the question, what if it would have been equal to cosine? Would you have done anything differently? Well, no, you still would go with the same form of y. Now, one that we haven't seen yet would be something like this. What if, I'll go ahead and use this one. What if it was 5t squared? Right? So we've seen how to address 3t. What about when we have t squared? So let's take a look at how we addressed it when we had a linear function. Well, we had at plus b. So if we have a quadratic function, then let's see if you're onto it. A y, the form of y should take a quadratic form such as a t squared plus b t. That's not a t, by the way. A t squared plus b times t plus c. So these are just a few takeaways. So now, what is a couple things that we haven't really addressed? And that's where we're going to go with this video. So one of the things that we have not addressed is, well, what happens if the angle inside of your trig function has been altered, right? Like instead of having t, what if you have 2t? Sine of, like a double angle, sine of 2t. So we need to address what's the form, how do we fix scenarios like that. The good news is it's not that far off from what we were using prior. And the other one, and this is the one that we're going to go to right now, is we haven't looked at forms of f of t when it looks something like this. Right, so this is where our journey will begin for this video. Notice now that we basically have f of t is well, it's the product of two functions. Right, we have 5t squared times e to the t. So let me go ahead and get to the problem. So this is kind of what I was pointing out last at the very end of last video is, well, what happens now? We were just doing it of a very easy case when you had e to the rt and you didn't have it multiplied by something else. So I want to, if you kind of follow me off to the side, this is an example. I've written an example of what they mean by c t to the m times e to the rt. So notice that we have c is a constant 5, t to the power of m, so in this case squared, times e to the rt, in this case r would be 1. Okay, so there's two things we need to address. The first thing is, how do we address the product? And then the second thing we need to address is that we still have those options because of this, right? Because you still have an e to the rt. You already saw that there's three options. It's either e to the rt or t e to the rt or t squared e to the rt, and that is still the case, even when when there's a product. So now let's take a look at what we have. So we have y double prime plus 4y. Somehow, there is a y out there that if you take the second derivative of it plus 4 times itself, should get us to 5t squared plus e to the t. So how do we address this, right? Because right now we're trying to figure out what is a good y. So the way you do this is we're gonna take each factor, each part that has the variable t in it, and we're going to think of what form that particular factor would take. So let's start with 5t squared. Right, so 5t squared, we already saw that if it's t squared, right, so quadratic, then the form should be a t squared plus b t plus c. So we're good there. Now, the next thing that we would need to address is the e to the power of t. So now our choices, and I'm going to write the choices, and for this one is going to be e to the t. It's good. Well, you think of it as e to the t, or t e to the t, or t squared e to the t. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead, and I'm just going to, this one would take a while. This was actually just going to tell you this, if we were meeting in class, this would be one of those problems that I group you up at the end of class and, give you the last, say, 30 minutes, 40 minutes to work on this problem, see what you can do with it. So we're gonna, and in other words, to kind of save some time, I'm going to just give you the derivatives up front, okay? And so you can, on your own time, you can work through, the derivatives and the substitution and everything. So we are going to go with e to the t. All right, so now, what form of y? What is y going to look like? Well, here it is. So that is the product of those two. We're going to think about this as two different functions. This is going to be our f. This is going to be our g. And this ends up being a t squared plus b t plus c times e to the t. All right, so now this is the part that I'm not going to go through. It's just some product rules, right? So you got a product rule of these two different functions. So I'm going to go ahead and give you y prime. I'm going to go ahead and give you y double prime. So y prime, again, this is a product rule. So it's f prime times g plus f times g prime. So what would come out would be 2a t plus b e to the power of t. I'm going to slow down to make sure I'm copying everything correctly, plus a t squared plus b t plus c. So that would be our g. And that is going to be times, in this case, g prime is still e to the t. All right, well, you got product rule applied twice for the second derivative. And so that's going to end up being 2a e to the power of t plus 2 times 2a t plus b e to the power of t. Let me hang out with me for just a second. I want to, since I'm not going through the derivatives, I know you know how to take derivatives. I just want to make sure that I am copying everything down correctly. Okay, I'm not quite done yet. So plus a t squared plus b t plus c times e to the t. All right. So we took a second derivative and combined some like terms, and this is what we have. So now you know that we're going to be plugging in what we have for y here, and we're going to be plugging in for what we have for y double prime here. Okay? So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go ahead and grab this information. We'll go to the next page. Oh no, let me see. I think I ran out of blank paper, so hold on, bear with me. Give myself some extras in case I need it. All right. So entertain yourself. You're good. Okay, so let's go ahead and paste that guy right there. Minimize it. And now let me get rid of all this extra stuff that I didn't want to grab. All right. So assuming that we plug in for y double prime plus 4y is equal to 5t squared e to the t. All right, so assuming we plug in for y double prime and plug in for y. Well, okay, so this is going to take up space, but I'm going to write it. Why? Because you and me were best buddies. No, I think I can actually do better than this, can't I? You know what I'm about to do, don't you? I got to start using my technology. Can I grab this right here? Copy. Paste. Hold on, look at me. Look at me. I'm trying to save time and space. So that's going to be my y double prime. And then it's got to be plus 4 multiplied by, and hold on, multiplied by y. All right, so my apologies. I'm doing my best to fit it all in here. I mean, I know I can always use 2 different lines, but it's easier if you can just see me just drop it in there like this. Okay, so let me just make sure that I've got everything in the right spots. I think I do. And now what I'm going to do is factor out. I'm going to factor out some things. So you can imagine this step. We're going to distribute, we're going to drop our parentheses, and we're going to start to factor out some things. So let me see what we got here. So we're going to factor out e to the t, and this is what's going to be left. So we got 2a plus 4at plus 2b plus I'll tell you what, I'm going to actually do, this is going to take forever if I just keep doing all these little baby algebra steps. So let me get it all the way factored out, okay? So that we can address the questions of what is A, what is B, what is C. So the final result of all of this work, after we've grouped and factored, let's get to that part. All right, I'm going to have to copy and I'm going to cut this and paste it again so I can make it smaller. So my apologies for all this dead silence here. But, I don't know. Deal with it. You'll be okay. Life will be okay. Ready? Plus. We got t squared. And I'm going to talk to you about this in just a second. T squared e to the t. That's a plus 4a. And all of that has to equal 5t squared e to the t. Okay. So let's take a look at the result here. So you can see why I would have assigned this as a group work, right? Where you could kind of chop up the work. And let's not lose sight that the goal of all of this is to find a y, right? So there is some y out there that should work. Now, in this case, I'm going to start with this part right here. So t squared, I'm going to kind of work off to the left here. So let's think about the t squared e to the power of t multiplied by a plus 4a. I'm going to go ahead and write that as 5a. So times 5a. And now let's take a look and say that must equal 5t squared e to the power of t. Now, I want you to tell me what you, just looking at that, just that first term. What must a be equal to so that that equation balances? Well, a would have to be equal to 1. Okay, now that I'm armed with that, I'm going to, I can go to the middle term. So that would be t e to the t times, well, that would be 4a plus, well, I got b plus 4b, so I have plus 5b. But only now I actually know what to plug in for a. So this ends up being t e to the t multiplied by 4 plus 5b. And now let's think about how that, right, now that must also equal 5t squared e to the power of t. And so the game becomes, all right, what must I do to find a? And then now that I have a, I plug it in, and what must I do to find b, right? So let me do this just for the sake of time. Let me get you to the result. So in this case, a would equal 1, b would equal negative 4/5, and c would equal negative 2/25. So that is the answer. And again, I know that I know that that's a lot of, I've glossed over a lot of the details there. On your own time, work through the setup, work through solving for A, B, and C. It would be good practice. You have the result because I'm about to write it. So what is y equal to in this case? Y is equal to 1t squared minus 4/5 t. B, or so in this case, C is negative 2/25, so minus 2/25 times e to the power of t. All right. So in this case, well, let me go ahead and leave it at that. So we've now seen. Let me kind of go back to that previous page. We've now seen how we address the setup for f of t being the product of two different functions. Now the good news is when it comes to your particular solutions for, I'm not gonna work one of these where you have a mix, you know, you see t to the m times e to the alpha t times cosine beta of t. I want you to understand that you just have a multiple factors here, right? So in each factor would have to be set up just like we did on the previous page. Now on this page we only had two factors, and we were able to set it up. If you have three factors, again, you would go through and set everything up, only now you would have that sine, a sine of t plus b cosine of t. You just got to be careful when you're using different letters. You don't want the same letter a to show up in multiple places when in reality you're getting two different values, right? So I want to make sure I'm using enough letters to represent that form of that y of t. So what I'm going to do is, for this video, I'm going to write something in here. I'm just going to give you some practice work, okay? And now I know that I said in the previous video, someone already told me that you said that you would give us the solutions, and you never did. So I'm going to post that solution to in that previous video. Believe me, I've done so many videos lately, I can't even remember what section that was. But I'm going to post that as a file in Canvas so that you can at least see the solution if you took time out of your day to solve it. Now, but here's your homework for between now and the next video. So I'm going to give you some different f of t's. All right, we'll go ahead and label A, B, C, things like that. I don't need you to go through and solve it. I want you to practice the setup. Can you actually set it up using the form that we need to use? So we have 7 cosine of 3t. Can you set that up? Can you set up 5e to the negative 3t? Can you set up, let's make it a little bit harder. I don't know why I used e. Well, I do know why I used e, but let's try 2t e to the t sine of t. Can you set that up? I'm not asking you to go through and find a, b, and c, all that stuff. I'm saying, can you actually choose the right setup to solve it? And finally, we'll do, let's do t squared cosine of pi t, right? So these are some harder ones, but you do have the techniques to set them up. And my question is, what I'm asking is, can you find the form of y of t? All right, so I will give you these answers in in the beginning of the next video. Try it. You really should try it. I mean, you shouldn't just jump right to the answers. You should try it and make some mistakes right now. And then what I need from you is I need you to reach out to me during my office hours if something's not clicking, because I can't help you unless you tell me what you don't know, right? So I have to lean on you to let me know if you're having trouble. I will see you guys soon. Stay safe.